said, very, very dangerous.
If you spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, guys? Let's see if y'all can hear me here. What's going on, guys? You guys hear me? Give me a 1. It's saying that they can hear me. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I don't see anything, but what's going on, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Warcry Podcast. I am your host, Jehovah Tiger, and on this wonderful late night edition of the podcast, I have joining me. I'm very excited about this, especially for those of you guys who get like to get spooked out at night. You can't sleep, so you said I'm gonna bring y'all something that gonna keep you up a little later tonight. But joining me, and like I said, I'm very excited to have him, is Rod from Lodge Tales Podcast. Rod, how's it going, man?
It's going good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited about this one because I listened to the one that you did about skinwalkers, and I was like, man, I kind of got goosebumps. Like, oh man, he's got something over there, man. But for those who've never heard of your podcast, who've never heard of you as a person, can you give them something? What's the podcast about, and just give them some details like that.
Yeah, so my name is Rod. I'm from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. This podcast that I created called Lodge Tales, it's just similar to the Warcry podcast. It's all geared toward natives telling their ghost stories, strange experiences. We cover everything from ghost stories, Bigfoot, little people, UFOs, and any other sort of strange stuff, cryptids and whatnot. There's quite a bit out there, and I think with my podcast, I think I've just scratched the surface, but there's already about 55 hours of content roughly, and I know there's a ton more to get to on it. It's just one of those things that keeps snowballing. More and more people are engaging the podcast and willing to share. See, because I searched for podcasts for a long time trying to find ghost stories, and you find them here and there. They weren't very prominent, right? So I wanted to hear from different reservations because I went to Chemawa Indian School in Oregon, and being around all the different tribes, I heard a lot of ghost stories there. So that, just knowing that there's so much out there, and at the same time realizing that a lot of indigenous people are reluctant to share on social media or podcast formats or anything like that. And I wanted to create a place where they could come and share freely. See, because a lot of these natives and indigenous people were sharing with non-natives, and I could tell sometimes the reluctance in their voices that they were kind of struggling with it. So it's always easier to talk to a fellow indigenous person about these things, because we don't feel like we're judged and we're more at home. So I kind of wanted to create something like that, and I've started it off, and I'm 55 episodes in, and it's been going good.
Yeah, man, you have a lot of stuff too, and I was kind of digging through that, and kind of getting more towards the beginning, before the podcast and before you started putting this stuff down in audio format. You said you grew up in an Indian school and you went to an Indian school. What was that like, man? Growing up.
It was really good out there in Chemawa Indian School. See, that's the second boarding school I went to. I went to the boarding school on my res too. But today the boarding schools are more geared toward like catering to the native student, right? Like there's a lot more history there. There's a lot more how would I say it? the education is geared toward the native way, I guess. Like, you have teachers that'll support you. Like, hey, you guys sign up. Here's a drum group right here. They're having drum practice, or things like that. There's going to be a sweat lodge this weekend if anybody wants to go over just to put out the word. They're going to be down there and it's starting at this time. And that's kind of how the school went. It was like that. It was pretty good. It was really good.
Yeah, where I'm from in Tahlequah, we have Sequoia High School, and it's got dorms and all that stuff. So I'm a little bit familiar, but I just thought it was always interesting, to hear it from different parts of the country, especially you hear all those ghost stories out in these different older, boarding school type places. And, when you were at those schools, what were some of the ghost stories or stories that you were hearing from different people?
Well, some of them would be like, they would talk about different spirits from where they were from. Like, I would hear of little people from Alaska. I would hear of skin. I really don't want to say that. The skinwalker. I
Yeah, I mean,
guess I
that's
don't
like,
mind saying it, but
yeah.
because it's not my tribe, but still, there's a stigma around that. So
Hmm.
I guess for all intents and purposes, I'll just say SW on this podcast. But
Hmm.
I would hear stories of them. These things they call stick people or stick Indians. I remember them saying they were called. Different sorts of little people. I've heard of, and uh, alcohol spirits, things like that. I would hear a lot about stuff like that, and the school itself kept us supplied with our own experiences. We used to look out. My roommate and I used to look out across the to the cafeteria from our dorm room at night, and we always heard stories of people like, yeah, if you stare over there, late at night for long enough, you'll eventually see things moving around. And so we did that, and sure enough, we started seeing things, but at first we thought it was just the light. If you focus on something dark and there's a little bit of light around and you shift your eyes, you'll get the image, like the false image of something moving from that
Hmm.
darkness that you were staring at. So we thought our eyes are playing tricks on us. And then there was something that just walked right straight into the light, like a shadow. And we realized, no, that wasn't my eyes playing tricks on me. Did you see that? He said, yeah. So what'd you see? So that thing that walked right behind where they serve food at. And I said, yeah, right into that door yet. So we both seen that, and it kind of confirmed to us, well, night after night when that would happen, we really just got bored. Like, we got bored of watching it. It happened so much. But that was just one of the little things that happened in that school. There's so many stories there in Shema Indian School itself. Yeah, so many.
Yeah, man, those different stories that they different people have. Like here, it's the one in Tahlequah. That school, I was told a story about something similar, I guess you'd say, to a stick person or a stick Indian, is like they basically dress this kind of whatever this. I don't know if you want to call it a doll, but something like that, and they were all kind of trying to scare different people with it. And dang, one night they was all kind of sneaking around out there, and they look up, and that stick, doll thing was sitting up at the stands of the football stadium, in the football
Oh,
stands. Yeah, I was like, oh man, y'all playing crazy with that.
so it just moved. It went there by itself. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. They put it away, and it was it just showed up in the bleachers, and people was like, man, dang.
Damn.
But so you went to that school, and so I guess when before I guess we can go a little further back, but what was one of your first paranormal experiences, or a family member who had a paranormal experience that kind of sent you on this path of enjoying creepy stuff? You got any stories from your childhood about seeing anything?
Yeah, yeah. The first it happened to me young, really young. When I was about 6 years old, I I was out at my uncle's house. My mom and dad and them would go out there, and they would have parties and stuff at night out there. He was a rancher, so he stayed way out in the country, about 15 miles out of the town of Browning on the Blackfeet Res. We would go out and see his old house was just this little tiny ranch house that had like a one bedroom, little small living room, and then a kitchen. it was just small in one bathroom, and there it was really tiny, and they would all be in that kitchen and living room, and when it got dark, other than that, we'd be playing outside, but when it got dark, we'd had to go into that room, and my older cousins are like my sisters. My uncle had all daughters, and so they'd all kinda take care of me in that room as the youngest kid out there, and, yeah, they would just make a bed for me on the floor or put me in bed with them, and they'd watch movies until I fell asleep, and if we were, in the morning, get up and go to town, whatever. Whenever we got ready to leave, they'd wake me up. Well, anyways, one of these nights, I heard all of those adults, it sounded like all the adults running out the front door, and I didn't, that wasn't normal. I never heard that before. So, I was really curious, right? I was a curious kid. They were always getting mad at me for getting into stuff and whatever, but I opened that bedroom door before those girls could stop me, and I went running out toward that front door. It's just a straight shot from that bedroom door to the front door. I went running straight out across that little living room and jumped off the porch, and as I looked to my right, across this little dirt road that leads to the house, there's a tack shed, and there's an outside light there and some corrals, and there was a red horse trailer parked there. Well, I had seen my uncles, um, they were kinda like online, and they were walking toward that tack shed, and they were all yelling, "Get out of here, get out of here." And I remember my uncle on the left was picking up this siphon hose, getting ready to throw it, just like a chunk of hose, and he was gonna throw it. This scene was kinda seared into my mind, and, the next uncle was just pointing, "Get out of here," and then the next one was picking up a rock, the next one over there was only 4 of them out there, and, the next one looked like he was kinda digging in his waistline for, like, a gun or a pistol or something. That's all I remember, and then my focus left them because I kept looking to see where they were what they were chasing. I was thinking, I was just a kid, so I was really curious. I was thinking, "Oh, is there a bear?" I always hear them talking about bears. Is there a bear? Is there a wolf? How about a coyote, wild dogs? That's what I was thinking. I was just a kid, and I really wanted to see what they were
Mm.
after. Well, as I look, it's so quiet out there, like, I kinda stopped, like, shuffling or moving, and I was just, like, trying to listen because I heard something, and what I heard was these old men. They were all talking Indian in the direction my uncles were walking, then they, like, stopped, and they just kept yelling and throwing stuff that way, and I couldn't see what they were after. I still couldn't see it. I was looking all over the ground. I couldn't see anything because there's just enough light from the outside light to see a little area. Um, and then my focus kinda went up to the top of that horse trailer, and there was about 7 or 8 owls sitting up there, and they were all
Yeah.
speaking Blackfeet, dude. Yeah.
Oh man.
And so that was the first time I ever, experienced anything like that, and I was really young, and just as I seen them and they were talking, they didn't sound like birds, they sound like old men. My mom grabbed me and jerked me into that house, and I don't know what happened after that. Like, like, did they chase them off? I don't even know. Like, my memory kinda stops there, I was so young, but, um today, I realize, growing up around the traditional way of life and ceremonies and stuff, I know that they're just messengers, they carry messages for us, so it's kinda how our tribe views them. And, after that happened, in my family, a lot of, hardship befell everybody that was there, families broke apart, one uncle lost a wife, daughter, and it just went like that. I think another uncle lost his wife too, and you know, my family fell apart. It was so I think they were warning those adults. They were warning us to, you know, there's something coming your way, so be ready for it. But they chased them off.
Man, golly, those I got goosebumps when you said that those owls, man, because it's that's one thing that I think, especially Muskogee Creeks, believe this, but owls are not something to be messing around with, and that's part of my people. I'm Muskogee Creek and Cherokee, so it's like I get it kind of from both sides, but do you think that somebody sent them your way to let y'all know something was happening, or do you think it was just, you know, just the way it was, you know, the way how it's supposed to be, you know?
Well, yeah, see, they get a really tough job. Their job is to bring messages, and they're usually not good ones. It's to forewarn you. So they get it. They don't have a good reputation because they're the bearer of bad news most of the time, you know? And they so those everybody that was there in that family, my uncle's family and his brothers that were there, and my dad and all them, see, we call them uncle, they really are cousins, but those I call them my uncles because we raised my dad was like, you know, one of their sons, and so anyways, we just call them uncles because 'cause they're older. But, our family, my dad, you know, his side is all full of, like, holy people, you go back far enough, same on my mom's side, same on, my uncles and all them. They all lived in that valley, the Medicine Valley, and there was medicine people in that whole place, so those spirits are around there. There's a lot there, and just so happened that those messengers showed up that night and, you know, tried to warn everybody because a lot of stuff went down after that. It was hardship after hardship after that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one thing I think is a lot different from, you know, here in Oklahoma to, you know, out west, even in the Four Corners, and those different tribes that are out there. Is a lot of it, man. Is I feel like a lot of that type of medicine in you know, for those who are non-native, you know, I always get this question of what's medicine? Like, what are y'all talking about by I'm, you know, the new age is magic or you know some type of stuff like that. But I'm always so fascinated to hear from you, the Western tribes, you know, especially up in you know Montana, because you guys are more, I would say, connected to y'all's uh, way of life, and I think it's just you know to me it's fascinating because here you know we were out Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee. You know, my people come from those places, and you know we got removed and sent over here to Oklahoma, so it was almost like we kind of didn't forget, but we just kind of had to live a certain different way of life. You know, so it's just fascinating to hear you know your perspective on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, the medicine is really it's really a powerful thing, and any of those holy people, those I guess we could call them medicine men and women, but they have a they're really humble, and they'll tell you that medicine don't come from them. You know, it comes from what we say Napinatusi or the sacred old man or the creator. Call him what you want, but that medicine ultimately comes from him. But it comes in other ways too, but it's always, you know, how would I say it? He's the one ultimately responsible for all of it, but it could come to you through different animal spirits, different elemental spirits. They can decide to, you know, take pity on you and give you a gift. And that's really where that comes from. It don't come from us. It comes from them. And we say they give you the right to do this. They'll What's happening when they're giving you the right is they're transforming your spirit so that that life force can flow through you into others or to wherever you're directing it. And there's a lot of rules, or I'd say taboos, that go with it. Like you have to live a certain life. There are things you can and can't do. Like, for instance, the beaver bundle. If somebody has that, all of the animals that are in that bundle, they can no longer hunt those animals. When you go to one of their houses, you can't knock on their door. You know, you're supposed to just stand there and wait for them to notice you and let you in because it's like when a beaver is in its lodge in nature and you pound on its hut, you're gonna scare it. You know, so they have all these different kind of taboos that you follow around with all of that too. But I mean, it's all to make sure that everything goes right, like nothing's out of whack with it because those spirits are the ones that bestow that power to you. or life force. They allow it to flow through you because those spirits can influence this physical world. We're spirit too. So we have a spirit and we also have a physical body. So it's like we walk two worlds as well. When you dream, you go into that spirit world too. And a lot of times those spirits come to you when you're dreaming. That's why fasting is so important to us. And because when you fast, you'll be sleeping and you'll get those dreams. They'll come to you or they won't. That type of medicine's not meant for everybody. Just because you're a native, that doesn't mean you're going to ever hold any sort of medicine in your life. You might be around those ceremonies your whole life, and you'll never have ever held a piece of medicine like that. It's not up to us. They choose you. If you're out seeking it and they think you're worthy of it, then they might help you. But it's never a guarantee. Never is.
Mm. Yeah, man, it's very interesting, especially because like I said, I mentioned before, it's just vastly different. Kind of how you were raised and how I was raised, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's vastly different, but I would say that you would be more connected to that, and here it's a lot more kind of hush hush. Like you really wouldn't know who, uh, who you wouldn't really know unless you knew things and could do certain things, and talking about it here is pretty taboo. Is it pretty taboo to talk about it kind of in your where you're at when talking about medicine?
Well, we can share general ideas about it, but like, yes, it is. So you can't share certain things because it's not to gatekeep or anything. It is, but the reason why is because you don't have the right to any of that. When you're taught, say you were given some medicine and somebody was transferring their rights to you to do that. Well, at that point, those spirits recognize you that you're going to carry that on. So they transform your spirit as well. They get you ready for it, and you have the right to it. So once you have the right to it, they'll teach you songs. They'll teach you exactly what to do in there. And once you have those rights and those everything that goes with it, you don't share that with anybody. Like you don't just start sharing it. Like you don't just start singing your songs, or you don't just start showing the way you paint or anything like that. You use it at ceremonies and you sing them there, but you wouldn't go out and just start teaching people things like that. That's on, I don't know how to say it, that's on like a high level. But we have, so there's different types of stories, right? There's the kid stories, there's the everybody stories, and then there's those high level stories that are exclusive to those medicine people.
Hmm.
What I can talk about is the everybody stories and the kid
Hmm.
stories. But on that high level stuff, even if I knew, I know some of it and I can't share that. But if I knew everything that they knew, I still wouldn't be able to share those types of things. It's just one of those things that it'll weaken your medicine.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, man. Growing up, especially with my grandpa, knowing a lot of people and knowing people who do, could help, I guess you could say, in certain situations. I was. It's always funny. I have people that will sometimes ask, like, "Oh, do you know anything about this, or is someone doing this to me, or is this happening because of this?" And I'm like, and there's certain stories that pertain to certain beings that I was told growing up that I'm like, I'm like, I don't know if I can. I always kind of be on the fence because I like when people share their stories. So I agree with you on that, man, because that's I always preface this, and I want to preface this now. If y'all know something, you know things, and don't come after me. I'm just the innocent bystander in this. I'm just kidding, but uh, but so kind of moving along in your life, um, you know you saw those owls, and then your family kind of had a lot of turmoil And did you see any other things, Bigfoot growing up, or any? I know little people. That's a topic that, man, I get that question quite a bit. Hey, when you gonna do an episode over LP? And I'm like, I don't know, man. But growing up, did you see any other things like that?
Yeah, I saw those little people once, just one time. Well, I could say twice, but one time well, I'll tell you this one. Um, let's see, same place, that same place I was talking about where those owls were. As a matter of fact, geez, I never thought about this. It's only like 50 yards from there, if that, 40 yards from where I seen that. Well, one night, see the old house, the old farmhouse, ranch house is like abandoned and falling apart, and they have a new house there now, a bigger house. Well, at this time, nobody lived in that bigger house either because all my uncles passed away, and none of his daughters moved back out there yet. So they were sitting just empty. And we would still use that land, like we would go down. Like one time I was at home on leave from the military, and we went down to the river after closing time. We went down there, just family, and we're all sitting around down there and had a fire going, kind of like a little after party. And I'm the youngest one there. It's always like that. I was always the youngest one there. But here we seen some headlights coming up that ditch bank road, the irrigation canal. There's a road alongside of it. It's called Ditch Bank Road. And we see some headlights coming up, and I watched where they came. They were on that bend. There's like a place where you can pull off, and the headlights turned off right there. Well, just after that, this other car come up. Here it was police, tribal police come up that road. They must have seen our fire. They wanted to go over and make sure it wasn't a bunch of kids, underage, but it was all of us people that were above 21, all adults. So they were shining their spotlight down there at us and everything. And my uncle and aunt were just, the two oldest ones there. They're, oh, don't worry about them. It's all private land. They can't come down here anyways. And we were just watching them, and they drove past really slow, and they turned around up there. There's a place to turn around by these cattle guards. That's where I assume they turned around, and they came driving back down. But those first headlights that popped up, what got it stuck in my head that it was my cousin was that my aunt said, "Oh, that must be your cousin so and so." And I said, "Oh, geez, I hope he comes up. Then I kind of have somebody to BS with. I won't be the youngest one here." And I just kept watching where I thought he parked, and I get up and I go, and this is kind of a cautionary tale too. Don't be consuming alcohol and going out in the dark. And so I get up finally because that cop went away. So I get up and you know what? I'm gonna walk up there and see if he's parked over and what he's doing. I wonder why he's just sitting there. And so I get up. I can't see up there, of course. It's too dark. And so I get up and I start walking all the way up. I pass that old house. I get on that ditch bank road and I'm walking down. I get to where that pull off is, where I seen the lights turn off, and there's nothing there. There's nobody there. And I'm thinking, where did he go? I didn't see him turn around. Like what happened? Where is he? And I walked down the road a little bit further because there's a straightaway, and by then my eyes kind of adjusted and I could see a little better because I was close to that fire when I was first walking up. And I'm looking down that way, and there's nobody. So I thought to myself, all right, well, I'll just walk back then. And that little road that leads by that house that comes off of that ditch bank road and leads down into the house by the corrals and all that, reach straight across from it. If you were to go across that irrigation canal, there was an old bridge there. Well, at this time, it had caved in, and there was only one side of it still standing. You could walk across that one side. It was sturdy enough, but the other side was just kind of caved in. And I'm getting close to that as I'm walking back, and I'm not thinking anything. I'm just like still wondering where my cousin went. I wonder what those lights were. What was that? And just then, as I look up, I see that little person. He's
Dang.
standing on that bridge, and I could see everything on him. He had on like these how would I say it? Like these leggings, and I remember there was a little bit of fringe on them on the sides, and he didn't have a shirt on, but his braids were tied behind his back. Like they were two braids, but they were tied back there.
Mm.
And when I seen him, he seen me, and he tensed.
Mm.
Like he got ready to bolt, like you tense up, you're getting ready to run or take off.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he did, and that's what I did. I
Man.
like tensed and I got ready to, react to anything. At that point, I was scared. And when he seen me, um, I started yelling, and I just kept thinking to myself, heck, I'm not gonna run to that fire, because a straight line to that fire, I would have had to run through a bunch of rose hips, wild roses, all those thorns. I would have had to go all the way through there, and there's a bunch of micro terrain. I know I would have got hurt, and plus it's off of that bank, and I would have got hurt. There's big rocks and everything down there. I know I would have got hurt. But my fight or flight was the urge was so strong to just run to that light that the only thing that kept me grounded was I used my voice. Like I challenged him, like, who's there? Who is that? Who's there? And I picked up my pace to where I was walking really fast. And I skirt wide around that. I got to the whole opposite side of that dirt road, that ditch bank road. And I didn't even go about, 10 steps closer to that turnoff to go back down to that fire. Then he dove off of that bridge into that water.
Dang.
And when he dove in, I was still scared, yeah, but I walked up. And by this point, I'm kind of like right up to that where he was standing. And I crossed over to his side, over to where that side of that bridge was still standing. And I peeked off of that down into that canal. And I waited there for a little bit because I was waiting to listen where he come up at. Because, I could tell he was kind of scared and I was scared too, but I didn't know where he come up. He didn't come up. I waited there for a little while and I waited and I waited. He didn't come up. So man, I just started walking back down to that fire, and I got by those empty houses, and I looked up where my uncle used to always sit in that window, and I was just, trying to still keep calm, and I said, geez, uncle, if that's you guys, please don't scare me. Don't scare me. We're just down here, trying to sit around for the night. We're not causing no trouble. Just don't scare me if that's you guys. And I just kept walking. I get down to that fire, and I tell, see, my dad's down there, my sister, one of my other cousins, a male cousin, female cousin, and like my aunt and uncle. And I tell them what happened. Well, they don't want to acknowledge it. They start trying to say, oh, it's probably this. It was probably an otter. It was probably this. It was probably that. But I told them, no, I know what I seen. It was a little man, those little people. He was up there. I said, that's what it was. And they just kept going on. Oh, it must have been your cousin. One of my cousins passed away. He says, it must have been him. He liked to swim right there. And I says, no, it wasn't him either. And so I just got quiet because I know they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to, acknowledge that something was happening, kind of interrupting the vibe, I guess. And so I just sat there and I said, all right, well, I'll be quiet about that. And I kind of sat next to my dad, but I faced the house. I didn't want to turn my back to that house. And so at the fire, I was sitting the opposite side of it. Then the house was on that side. So I'm sitting there looking up at that house and just quiet, thinking about what I seen. And all of a sudden, right above that house, this ghost light appears.
Mm.
Right above the old abandoned house, the big one. I mean, empty house, the big one. This ghost light appears, and it was about the size of a beach ball. But if anyone out there has ever seen a ghost light, they're the oddest things because you couldn't use one for a torch. They're not like that. They don't cast light. It's all like contained within itself. Like there's no shadows from it or nothing, but it's light. It's really an odd thing to see, kind of this weird enigma that happens sometimes, but they're spirits. And so I'm looking at this ghost light, and then I point, I show all of them. I'm like, look, I told you guys I seen something up there. Now look at that. And we're all just watching it, and it just gets quiet, and we're just watching it. All you can hear is the crackling of the fire, and everybody's still. And we're watching it, and it does this weird swirl thing. Like like how water swirls down a tub. That's how it starts to swirl. And as it's swirling, it gets smaller, 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 size of a golf ball. Then it just blinks out of existence. It's gone. And we all watched it. So I told him, see, I was telling you guys there's something out there tonight. I don't know what it is, but we visit for a little bit longer and we all headed out. But yeah, that was the one, little person that I seen that night.
Let me ask you this, while it's on my mind. So I've had relatives or a relative tell me that they think that LP is kind of like I don't know what you call it, like an interdimensional type of being, and that's how they know, that they can stop time and they can kind of like you kind of fold a piece of paper up, you and you can poke a hole through it with the pencil, and then now you can push the pencil all the way through, and it basically traveled through the paper.
Hmm.
I had a relative say that that's kind of how they travel, and I'm also wondering, kind of what's your opinion of what they could be.
Well, in our way, we say that they're spirits, but they can be physical too. They can go because they can. All right, so my dad, same area, not even far from there, about 200 yards north of here. There's it's like really flat land where a flood actually went through there one time. So there's old driftwood still there. That flood was in the 60s, but there's still wood piled up back in there that you could still harvest and burn. It was a lot of wood, and they were back there one day getting wood. They pulled up in a truck, and they were getting off because they knew this area they wanted to back that truck up to, but they didn't trust driving through all that rough little terrain, so they were walking it off first to see if they could get back there a little easier. And as they're walking, there's three of them. As they were walking, they pull the truck up, they get out, and they start walking around, and they see this little wagon. And when my dad told me this, I said, well, how big was it? I asked him. And he said, like a kid's wagon. So in my mind, I had like he's seen a kid's wagon. That's what I thought. And he says, yeah, we seen that wagon. So we just walked back and looked at our spot where we was going to go, and we decided to go somewhere else. So we were trying to get out of there another way too, but it was just too thick. He said, so we had to go back through that way. He says, and when we went back, that wagon was gone. I said, well, what do you think happened? And he said, it was those little people. He says, they must have been out getting wood too, and we must have surprised them. And they probably hid in that grass or somewhere, because when we got back, their wagon was gone. I said, like a kid's wagon? He said, no. He said, like an actual wagon from like the 1800s.
Lee.
He said we could see little rivets on it. This is a regular wagon. About the size of a kid's wagon that you pulled, though. And so, yeah, that's what they seen, and it was gone, and they didn't get wood in that area. But that same house, that big one I was telling you about, where that ghost light was above that, one time my cousin was sitting in there when she moved in there. She inherited the place, and so she was living there with her kids, and she says, oh, Rod, that little man, he's always raising heck with everybody. He says those girls will be down there playing with their Barbies, and he'll drag them under that bed, scare them, and things like that.
Golly.
He said, so one day I was laying there, because it's downstairs and an upstairs. Downstairs, all bedrooms, bathroom. Upstairs is the living room, kitchen, and one bedroom and a bathroom. And she was laying on the couch upstairs, and she said I could see him. As I was laying there, my feet were facing down toward the stairs coming up to the living room. And the couch is laying there. If I just look down at my feet, I can see those stairs, the top of those stairs. And I see him peek up at me. I'd look over at him, and he'd duck down. She said, I start getting annoyed. She said, because I was getting tired of that. She said, so I picked up my shoe, and I threw that shoe at him. She says, geez, that shoe didn't even disappear long over those stairs to go down, and it come flying right back up at me.
Golly.
Yeah, that little guy that one in there was no good. He used to always raise hell with everybody. That one in there, he was really no good, scaring them and stuff,
Yeah, and I know that I was always told, growing up that they're pretty mischievous, and that. And my grandpa told a story one time that I can't remember if it was him or if it was a relative, but basically they was out playing and they was kind of getting off in the woods, and their mom always used to tell them, or their family member, I can't exactly remember the exact details, but the family member said, "Don't go over here in this part of the property because little people take you off and they'll get you lost." And I can't remember if it was him or if it was a relative, but they basically went over there and they didn't come back. Like it was like they left at like 10 o'clock in the morning, didn't get back till like late, almost dark. And they said basically kind of thought they was just wandering around. They kept seeing something and getting kind of curious and going over there and checking it out. The next thing they know, they didn't know where they were at. And with telling that story, I know that they always say that they can be very you know mischievous, but they also can be kind of, and I don't want to say evil because that's not really what I don't really think that's the right word to describe them. But I was always told that there's a good and then there's a bad. Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, there's a balance in everything. There's a balance, so you'll have both spectrums. Yeah, you'll experience both because there are people that have them as helpers in the ceremonies that help them, do different things. And usually those people that have helpers, like not just little people, but other spirits too, you can't lie to them because those spirits just tell them, before you show up, what you're about, what you're there for, or what you're gonna, ask, who you are. They'll already tell them, so they already know who you are before you show up. But those are the ones that are good. They help with things. And I mean, there's also like our traditional relationship with them, before any of the Europeans came, was we there were tobacco societies that used them to to plant or to cultivate the tobacco for us. We were hunter gatherers, so we never stayed put in one place. We always migrated following the buffalo. So when you would come back the next season, the tobacco would be nice and lush, and you'd be able to harvest. Well, those tobacco society members they were the ones in charge of that. So their relationship with them was with that tobacco. They would, do certain ceremonies and stuff, and those little people would cultivate it all year. And you'd come back and you'd get it, and there was an agreement that they had with each other, a treaty, if you will, with each
Mm.
other, where they would work together with things. And to this day, there are people that make them little clothes, little buckskin outfits and stuff. And some people make them little tiny pipes, and they offer them to them and things like that, giving thanks for the things they do for us. Because there are good ones. There's good ones that help, but at the same time, you can't mess with them. They won't let you mess with them. You can't raise hell with them. Like my cousin was telling me this story, and she caught the end of it, and her aunt was talking about it. It's one of those types of stories where the older people are talking and all the kids are kicked away. When you get to a
Mm-hmm.
certain age, you can sit around and listen to these. Well, they had just walked in on them while they were talking about this, and this is what they caught. Uh, Her aunt was saying, uh, "Yeah, and that lady, don't know what she did to them. Don't know what she did to those little people, but when she went to sleep, they went over to her and they took all of her teeth out, and they just start putting them back in the old way. Molar in the front tooth where the molar is, just put them back in the old way." Said she had a really hard time talking after that. When she woke up, she couldn't talk right because her teeth are all messed up. And then they seen my cousin, and I'm like, "Hey, you girls, get out of here! You guys supposed to be in," But that's all
Ah.
they caught from that. But I mean, there's so many stories with these. There's so many stories. One of my friends was a cop, and he was staying at his friend's house in a place called Heartbeat. Well, just outside of Heartbeat somewhere, another community on the res. They were getting there late, and what normally happens is they get to that house and, they would knock, or that dog would bark usually, and then they'd knock, and they knew somebody was there, so they'd let them in. Well, they were staying with them for a couple weeks. Um, Folks must have been out of town, or I don't know, something like that. But they were staying there, and they were getting back late that night, and they get to that house, and it's all dark. Nobody's there. I mean, no lights are on, and so they're just getting ready to knock, and it's this man and his brother. They're both staying with his friend there, and they're getting ready to knock. They see that curtain. They knock, and then that curtain opens, and they're wondering what the hell. And they look down, and here's one of those little people is kind of looking up at them. And then he closes that door, and then before long, that dog starts barking. And then the mother gets up and lets them in, and that as they're waiting for to be let in, my friend's saying, "How do we explain this to her? What we just seen? What's in her house? How do we say this to her?" He said, "You don't. Just go in and go to sleep. Don't say anything." And so what they think happened, because they got in that night, of course, and they went to sleep, and they didn't see it in there. But what they think happened was, since everybody was asleep, that little person looked at them and noticed who they were. And, "Oh, I know them." Closed that curtain and went and shook that dog to wake that dog up, because that dog started barking, and that alerted the person to open the door. Yeah, I
Man.
mean, there's a lot of them. Another one down by the Badlands. Here was a guy that lived down there by himself, an old man. And one time my wife had to deliver food to him. I think it was a Thanksgiving meal. They had to deliver food to him. And as they're pulling up, because he couldn't come to the center to get the food. He was, old, didn't have a vehicle, I don't think. And so they had to deliver to him. But as they're pulling up, they see one sitting in that windowsill. And this one looked different. Like, usually they look like these little traditional natives is usually what they look like. Like buckskin, like a snapshot of, like, say, the 1600s, just really old. And this one looked different. It's kind of had little jeans on, little cowboy boots, little cowboy shirt, braids. It's kind of even smoking a little tiny rolled up cigarette. And they seen him take a puff of that cigarette and blow that smoke out, and he looked at them, and he put his cigarette out real quick and jumped off of that windowsill. And they were kind of scared. They were scared. My wife and them, they were kind of like shook up by that. So they go, "Oh, geez, well, let's bring this food in there real quick." So they go in and say, "Oh, yeah, thanks. Been expecting you guys." They just looked at each other like, "Oh, geez," But they said, "Hey, we seen that little person in your window." So, "Oh, yeah, it's my partner." He just said it like nothing and start eating. Yeah, he lived down there all by himself by the Badlands.
Man, I used to. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, and then there was this one story that's really strange. My friend that's a cop, same guy who's seen that little person at that house, he was telling me this. He said, up in Canada, see, because Canada, that's where the rest of our tribe is at. There's 3 bands of us, and the other 2 are up there. Well, 3 bands, but you got the North Piikani and the South Piikani. We're the South Piikani, so really there's 3 more bands in Canada. But there's a place called the Sand Hills that we don't go. We don't go there. There's reasons for it, and it's kind of a long story, but we don't go there because that's, I guess in a nutshell, that's where, like, people go and they die, or their spirits will travel through that area. So we don't really mess with it. But they were doing oil exploration up there, and to do that on their reserve land, there's this agreement that if a non-native company comes in, they have to hire a certain percentage of the natives, because they're working on that land. So they couldn't find any Blackfeet to go help them once they found out where they were going to be doing it. Like Sand Hills. Oh, no, I ain't going. You guys can now pick somebody else. I ain't going up there. It just kept happening. Nobody'd go with them. So they just went with the crew they had, and they started doing their exploration. Well, that guy end up leaving. He's not a indigenous person. He doesn't know things like that, and he ended up leaving. He got spooked out of there,
Mm.
and they asked him, "Well, why'd you guys quit? Like, what happened? Why'd you guys quit early?" And this elder went and tried to find out what happened, what was going on, and so he was telling this elder that, um, well, I'll just tell you what he's seen, and then I'll interpret it. He said, "We seen these little people, and they had this lodge set up, and they were all having this they were having this dance, and there was different ones, stationed here, there, and they were set up just so, and there was different ones praying and things like that, and we seen this, all of us, and we didn't know what to make of it, and it scared us because there's little people. How do you have 1 foot tall people like look like old Indians doing some kind of a ceremony?" And he says, so when we seen that, we left. We didn't want to mess with that. That was beyond anything. We didn't sign up for that. No, we're getting out of here. And that elder translated. He says what they witnessed was those little people having their own Sundance, having
Mm.
a Sundance out there.
Man.
Yeah, and this was a non-native guy that seen that. So he pulled stakes and run off.
Got to get out of there, man. ASAP.
Yeah,
And it's kind of crazy because, especially here, growing up, I would always hear these older stories of these Indians that are in their, late 80s, 90s, and they were alive like in the Great Depression, like before the Great Depression, but they were old.
yeah.
This is like back in the 80s and 90s, but they would, the elders that are now elders were little kids, and there was an elder, Cherokee elder. He's now elder, but he was a boy at the time, and he was telling a story that he used to mess in, he was kind of used to mess with, or he'd run around, uh, kind of in the backwoods and out kind of outside of Tahlequah. And there was this old man who would always, he's kind of mean. He said, man, he's kind of, grouchy, just mean for no reason.
Mhm.
And they, he snuck in and kind of went to his house one day, and he kind of looked in the window, almost kind of broke into the house a little bit, but he ended up seeing it. He had all these LP, these little people, in the house, and I guess and they said that he was real well known for a lot of things, and he said that one time he saw the man in town, and he could see that his like jacket or like whatever he was wearing was like
Mhm.
moving. Like I think he had overalls or something like that, or his shirt, but you could kind of tell that it was moving. That his like something was underneath there moving around, and he saw a little head pop out.
Oh.
He he was he said this guy was old too, like old, but they said that he knew a lot of those things, and took care of different people, and those they helped him basically. So I don't, I don't really don't hear those stories hardly anymore. Those. I mean, I might have been like 5 or 6, 7 years old when that story was told to me from somebody who was like in their mid 40s at the time. So it's a little bit sad that we don't get a lot of those stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine. So, I mean, we were really fortunate to be able to, keep a lot of our stuff alive and then reclaim it too. We were
Mm,
really, really lucky. We're still in the process of that too, reclaiming a lot of these things that have gone. But there's some things that are gone, and I don't know if they'll ever come back because they lost all the songs to them, or
mm,
something like that.
yeah, and I used to get told. I mean, I guess really, and I was going to tell this story, but I'm kind of curious on if you guys have a similar type of being. But here in Oklahoma, we got a lot of lakes and rivers and creeks and like we got a lot of that stuff around here in northeast Oklahoma. Do you guys have any snakes, large mythical type snakes like tie snake or uh, different types of horned snakes?
Yeah. Yeah, they're. Here's an old story about when one of our heroes came back. He was immaculately, how would I say, he immaculately appeared here. He was born from a blood clot, and those stories are called blood clot tales or katoyes. And in one of those stories, see what he was doing was he was righting all the wrong that was in this world at the time. There was a being that was before him sent here. Um, his name was Napi, and he was to teach the people how to live with the earth again, and create different things. And he kind of led the people for a while, like how to live a good life. Um, he ended up being mischievous toward the end because the longer you stay away from the creator, the more you get like that. You're separated from him, so you don't have that influence, and you become mischievous. And that's what happened to him. So eventually he was taken back. But the being that was sent after him to fix all of these things was Katoyes. And one of the things he had to fight was that horned serpent. He had to, do away with that because it wasn't meant to be here. There was a lot of things unleashed during that time that he was kind of stamping out, putting down. He was one of our heroes of our creation stories. But yeah, there's that story. But in recent times, here's a lake called Four-Horn Lake. And recent, I mean by, like, say, my wife's, what would it be, her great grandpa, second great grandpa, something like that. Um, he was out uh, on horseback, and he had his bow, and he was coming up to that lake on the south side. There's kind of like this hill, and there's like a reservoir today there, but there was like this hill on that side, and he was coming up on that hill, and he looked across, and he seen these antelope taking off from that lake, running up over that hill, and he thought maybe he could go around and get at them. But as he was up there watching, what he seen was this huge, uh, I guess serpent, I guess we could say, but it moved funny, like it kind of bunched up and stretched out, bunched up and stretched out, kind of like a caterpillar. And it was kind of like looking around where those antelope ran to. Then it turned back down toward that bank, kind of inched its way along that bank, and then went into that water and was gone. But there are stories of that being there, that thing, that serpent that's in that lake. And there are, in the old days, that lodge is still around, but there's also a serpent lodge, that spirit. And when you look at it, it has those horns on it too. That serpent lodge. A painted lodge. Those are those medicine lodges and stuff. Those holy ones. So yeah, those are we got stories of those in our tribe. We do. Even the crazy ones, like um here was this guy that lived right behind the grocery store, and the dogs kept knocking all the garbage cans over. He would go back there and see he's knocked over everybody else down that alley. And he was kind of getting frustrated by it. And so he thought maybe one day I'll catch those dogs and, scare them so they just stop coming around here. Well, he heard those trash cans get knocked over again, and he snuck through the yard and looked down. And what he seen was this thing where from the waist down looked like a snake. And from the
Mm.
waist up just looked like a regular human. And it was kind of, he said it was just kind of like shimmying across the top of this fence, and it would look down into a trash can, and if it didn't see what it liked, it just knocked that whole thing over. Kept
Mm.
going down that alley doing that, like a snake man.
Yeah, man. Wow.
Yeah, and then this other one, uh, here's this man that, he's a Sundance man, and he has other bundles and stuff too, but, he he's not a Sundance man today. He transferred his bundle, but when he was holding all of this stuff, he was at his house one night, and his dogs start barking outside. So he gets up to go look, and he he sees his dogs barking toward the road, and there's this dumpster over there near the road. They put all their garbage and it gets picked up. But he's seen a figure over there, a man, and his dogs just kept really barking and barking. And he thought, well, he says, I better get these dogs inside. And he grabbed his rifle at the same time. And anyways, he was standing there just watching, just in case something happened, somebody acting goofy. And that man started running at him. And when he got close enough, he could see it wasn't a man. Yeah, it was an outline of a man, shaped like a man, but what it was all of these snakes. Like, imagine like a ball of snakes, but shaped like a man, and they were just all writhing around.
Man.
And as it would run at him, it would bounce off because it would hit his barriers that he had up around his house. It would bounce and knock him way back again. And it would get mad and would get up and start running again and get knocked back. And this holy man, finally, he kind of looked at him and he said, you've got no power here. So look at you. You're making yourself look foolish. You need to go away. You're not supposed to be around here. You can't harm nobody here. And that man just kept trying. Then he finally stopped and he just walked back in his house and basically ignored it.
Man.
Yeah.
God, man, that's crazy. Because I know with snakes here, I haven't seen the snake, but I've seen, a story that I've told on the podcast. In this podcast is, I saw one on the Illinois River out in Tahlequah. Basically, the water was going, the regular flow of water was going the right way, but then there was a little section of the water. It wasn't little; it was like half the river basically was going the opposite way. And I ain't never paddled so hard in my life to get off, get out the water. And that summer we had a lot of people drown in that river. It was a record, I think. And then that next following season, it was like a flood that basically flooded out and basically destroyed all the floating places that that were along the river, and basically wiped them out. And I always think that people not taking care of the water, that water was just so polluted, especially people putting beer cans, glass, just not taking care of it. And I think that tie snake, I think he made sure that people taking care of that water, and that made sure that nobody was able to go out there. But just real quickly here, for those everybody who keeps jumps in, jumps out, or has been listening, in the comments or in the chat, if you got a question for Rod, or if there was a topic that you want him to talk about or tell a story about, put it in the chat and I'll read it off to him, so he at the end of the show, so he can make sure that he can answer that for you, or tell you a story. But I appreciate everyone that has been jumping in and out. And the next kind of topic that I'm seeing here in the chat, this is from Uncut Savage. The only thing like these that I've seen is what people call a dog man. Only it was when I was 5 in 1976. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, just one time, but I don't hear about them, up in our country. I really don't. If more people have these stories, please get into contact with me and from my tribe, Blackfeet tribe, because I seen. Okay, so I was leaving from Heart Butte with my wife, and we're heading back to Temed, and you got to drive across the country there, and it's paved, of course, but just where that lake I was telling you about, that Four-Horn Lake, that turnoff, we just passed that, and it's kind of a straightaway until you get onto this other highway. And as we're going down that, it's a thunderstorm out. And I remember looking toward, like, I was driving slow enough that I could look toward the thunder. I just thought it was kind of pretty and stuff, how it was lighting everything up. So I was kind of taking my time, not driving too fast, but I was looking to my left where that thunder was coming from, lightning and stuff. And as I looked, it lit everything up for a split second, and I seen this thing, like, it was on the, how do I describe it? it almost looked like it was in a push-up position, but I know its front arms weren't on the ground, and it had shoulders like a human. Um, it was dark, and I could see these eyes that were, because nothing was shining on it. Its back was faced to the lightning, but its eyes had this redness to them that stood out in the darkness. Uh, but it's like almost like it was getting ready to stand up. It wasn't in a push-up position, but like its hands were off the ground and it was just getting ready to stand up. And I seen a long snout on it. I seen these pointed ears almost straight up on top of its head. And it must have been about 7 feet tall if it was to stand up, just based off of how big it looked. But I caught this glimpse of that, and I asked my wife, I said, "Did you see that?" She says, "No, what?" And I was like, "Dang," because her and I always see things together, but she didn't see that. And I slowed down a little more and I kept looking, but I couldn't see where it went because it goes down a slight dip, and that land where it was at was a little higher. So it was just on the other side of that fence, and there's like a little micro terrain that looks like a ditch on that side too. That's what it was in, getting ready to stand up on the other side of that fence. And as I went down, I couldn't see no more. And we just wanted to get home. And plus, I was kind of freaked out. I didn't want to turn around and go flash around for whatever that was, because first thing I thought, it sounds goofy, but the first thing I thought was, did I just see a werewolf?
Dang, yeah, for
That's what I
real
was
though.
thinking in my mind, And there's no such thing as a werewolf. Jeez, I don't know. So we drive back home, and we go back out to my in-laws the next day, and I asked my father-in-law, I described everything I seen, and he was listening to me, and he says, "Yeah, it must have been a bear." I said, "Those bear's ears ain't like that though." And it had this weirdness in its eyes I never seen. I never seen anything have eyes that almost look like glow red. I don't know. He said, "I don't know either." So I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know. But if that's what a dog man is, well, then I seen one. But I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah, and a lot of people. That was another kind of thing that I think I've been asked a few times about was, what's your opinion of that? What is that? And the only frame of reference I have in my mind is a shapeshifter, someone who can turn into you know uh, these animals. Uh, and one thing that is kind of weird about the dog man entity phenomenon, whatever you want to call it, is people always say that they have like almost like a it's like they have a look about them, like they kind of like they know that you see them, and they almost kind of like it that you're scared. Um, and I had a listener tell a story, and I've mentioned this before, but that she was a little girl, but basically one night she looked over and there was a wolf head in her, it was looking into the to her house, and she
Mm,
lived outside Oklahoma City, and Oklahoma City is a pretty metropolitan. Like, there's not a
yeah.
lot of forests. And she said she saw it and was looking into her window, and she was so scared. And I asked, we she kind of described it as having kind of like a almost like a hazy glow to its eyes, and the only thing that she thinks is that the property that they lived in was in middle, like I said, it is in a neighborhood, like a lot of people around. That there was a corridor of forest that ran in between these like the two housing additions. And one thing I don't understand what that thing is it is it somebody that maybe that's not in between shapeshifting or what, but I don't know what that thing is, man.
Well, there's so many different beings like that, entities like that. There's a horseman, um, dog man. There's a goat man. Uh, I've even heard of this bunny man, believe it or not. Sounds really strange and goofy, but yeah, bunny man. There's all these different things like that. And, of course, you got the Imoyitapi too, that Bigfoot. They're all these man, ape, There are always these things, half man, half something, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think myself that they're spirits, but they have the ability to become physical. They have that ability to walk this land if they want. But I don't think they can do it all the time. They do come here, they are seen, but they can disappear just like that too, just out of thin air. They can influence things here, you know, by like a goat man can get you to go gamble. He can get you drunk. He can encourage you to do misdeeds, things like that. And you'll see him, you'll be talking to him, he'll buy you drinks at the bar, that kind of thing. Um, so these other ones too have an ability to influence things going on here, but they ain't real. Like as we think real, like humans are real.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like us. What we perceive to be real. They're like spirits, but they have the ability to influence things, to appear real, to even grab you, throw you. But like I think with Bigfoot, I think there's a physical one of it that must hide or got medicine that can disappear, do these things. Then there's also a spirit, just straight spirit of those too. Those are the ones that become the helpers of certain holy people, things like that. They have Bigfoot medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a wide spectrum, but in general, I think they're all spirits, is what I think, and they have the ability to turn real, except for that Bigfoot. I think I think the ones that are just straight physical have really powerful medicine. If they're not
Yeah.
if they're not a
Mm-hmm.
spirit.
I believe the same thing. I just that's one thing that I always I have people misquote me a little bit and say, "Oh, it's you think it's a tribe of people." Because Cherokees, we believe that they're kind of a secret tribe type of thing where they're their own. They have their own ways of life, and they understand how to evade us, and they know how to disappear. And one thing that I always find interesting about Bigfoot is there's people that say, "Oh, well, they have cloaking ability, like they can just snap, and go invisible." And they try to do the scientific thing where it's like, "Oh, well, if it's standing next to a tree and it turns its head and the sunlight hits just right, and they can disappear." But I've heard stories, you know, back, especially like before, things are how they are now, of people basically sitting on one and they think it's a stump and they get up and they kind of turn back and there's nothing there. And the stump they sat on was a Bigfoot. Um, that what's a crazy legend, that I always like to talk about because it's interesting to me is there's a man named Chito Harjo and he was on the run from the federal agents during I think Prohibition era. I think is what he was doing, but he had a snake gang, and my ancestor Edward Scott was a part of that snake gang, and Chito would talk about Bigfoot bringing him medicine and showing him how to quote unquote cloak or disappear basically,
Hmm.
or turn into a stump or become a bush or And my grandpa always said this growing up. He said if you don't want to be seen, you have the ability to not be seen. And I always thought that was interesting, kind of that whole dynamic with Bigfoot.
Yeah, because you can't measure medicine with any of these science tools that we have today. That's not how you measure that. Is there a way to measure it? I have no idea, but you can witness it and you can experience certain medicines. You can see that they do that. A lot of times they're called miracles in other religions. The miracles, how they do that. And that's what that is, because that Emoyitapi, he's more in tune with nature than we are. You know, if we're just measuring his bushcraft versus our bushcraft, geez, he's like we might as well just be newborns, and he's a well-educated older man. you
Hmm.
know, they are so good at living with nature and all that, and And when you live out there with nature, that's where all the life forces, that's where all the spirits are. Of course, you're going to start, being closer to those spirits, and they'll teach you things and you'll be able to learn from them, because in our way, we live in this duality where we have this physical world and, that spirit world, and they a lot of times are connected, so those spirits do come around people that are humble, that don't, like, say this, it would be like, if I was to compare it to us, say there was people using medicine in bad ways, it would come back really hard on them. I suspect that they have the same set of rules they have to abide by when using medicine. That's why they're not, creating tornadoes to just devastate a whole town, because that would go against, you know, their medicine. So they can't do that. They're not allowed to do that, or so it'll go away. It'll just disappear. They'll take it back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they kind of have these same sort of restrictions that we do. And a lot of times, I mean, here's a story, an old story. This guy named Suncalf, who got in a fight with his dad up in Canada, and he ended up hitting his dad and knocked him down, knocked him out. Thought he had, killed him. So he took off, and those Mounties were chasing him, and he hid in one of those old death lodges where they had the bones in there, just kind of all piled up in there. He hid under a lot of those. He could hear those Mounties coming around, and finally they left, and he was too scared to get up, so he just stayed in there. And when he stayed in there, he was hearing voices. There were people talking. It's like, yeah, let's take pity on him. He came here for a reason. Let's help him. And then another voice would say, no, let's just kill him. Yeah, we're just gonna kill him. I think, yeah, we're just gonna. They just kept talking, and finally, because he thought he had, made his dad pass away. So he says, well, if you're gonna do that to me, then do it. And then the other ones start talking, no, let's help him. Let's help him. So that night they gave him a bunch of medicine. Those different spirits gave him medicine. One of them was to unlock any lock, to go invisible, to travel, to doctor, to heal people. Like, I want to say he had that doctoring that fixes pregnant women. When you're carrying a child, you can't use a lot of medicine. Well, he had that medicine to heal them. Different things he got. Well, he finally went and turned himself in, and he had all these medicine pouches like around his neck, and the stockade that they put him in was just a hole in the ground. Where all you could do is just stand up, walk in a little circle, and there's just a bench carved out of the dirt. And they had him in that for the longest time, and they got a new what is that called, guard or whatever, prison guard there, and these were Indians too. They were, and that older Indian was just kind of looking at that younger guy. He says, "Why is he wearing that stuff? Nobody gets to wear things like that. We should take it from him." He said, "I'm gonna take it," and so he did. He took it from him, and he was just gonna bring it to his house and like store it so it wouldn't get lost in that place, I imagine. But geez, he was riding his horse home. It was gone. He couldn't find it. It was gone. It wasn't in his jacket no more. And when he gets back the next day, he's just kind of walking around in that down there, and he's got his medicine pouches on, and they had him shackled too, and his shackles are off, and he's just kind of walking around down there. Look up at him. And so he stayed there for like 3 years.
Dang.
And he figures, not in just that, they move him out too, but all over the place in there but that was one of the places they kept him too, was in that hole. So they would move him out and put him in a regular cell and whatever. But one day he said, I think I stayed here long enough. I think I'm gonna leave tomorrow. Like, I've done my time. This is fair for what I did. And because he didn't unalive his dad, he just thought he did. So he's like, all right, so I'm gonna probably head out tomorrow. Geez, when they were doing count that one time, they were doing head count, he wasn't there. And so they start riding the direction they know he lived. And they seen him cross over this one hill. And they'd ride up to that hill, and he was just walking. By the time they crested that hill and they were getting ready to ride down on him, should have just been over that hill. Geez, he'd be plumb across that valley, just going over the next hill. And they couldn't catch him because he had that ability. And finally he he went back again and he left again. And this time when he left again, he'd just make himself totally invisible. They just ride right by him. He'd just keep walking and get home. He ended up living his life out in Glacian, Canada, up that way. And he married into the Cree tribe and he doctored those Crees for a long time before he finally passed away. But,
Mm.
that's medicine.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's like Bigfoot medicine right there.
yeah,
You
for
know?
real,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, that's like it's just crazy because you saying that, uh, I mean, I don't know why, but you ever heard of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders? You heard of that? Uh,
No, I haven't.
so there's a Cherokee guy, uh, Leroy Hart is I guess allegedly, I'm gonna say allegedly, but he had murdered uh, these girls at this camp, and he was on the run for quite some time. But what he would do, and they said that he had that medicine to kind of evade,
Mhm.
and there'd be times where he'd be sitting across the police station, just kind of hanging out, and the police would be like, "Oh, we got him. We can get him right now." And so they go try to go get him, and they look over and he's like on down the way, like he's just far enough. But yeah, that reminded me of that, and the one thing, and I'm sure you have a plenty of Bigfoot, but have you heard any stories about Bigfoot kind of being evil or kind of being, not the nicest?
Yeah, there are stories of that. The ones that come to mind though are really well, all right, I'll tell this one. Um Geez, kind of hate to tell this one, but here we are. Oh, okay. So here was this guy back home, and I'm gonna keep it really general, really in general. I have a friend that was talking to me about this, seen the pictures, um, talked to this gentleman that this happened to, told me the whole story because he actually investigated it, told me what happened there. And so according to my friend, this is what happened, but I know the guy this happened to personally. I know him as well. And okay, so as it goes, he keeps getting bothered at his house, um, where he'd hunt and he'd have his deer hanging that would get stolen. Doors back there would get broke open. Things were getting disturbed and, you know, kind of being a nuisance. And then one day his dog ended up killed and thrown on his front porch. And that must have really kind of pissed him off. The last straw. So he posted up and he waited and he waited and he waited, and he waited. And he had his rifle with him. And one of those Imoitapis came out and he shot it. And it goes down and this huge one comes out. So he figures he shot a female. This huge one comes out and it's holding it in its arms and it's screaming, like screaming at the sky, like it's really sad. And this guy starts taking pictures of all this.
Oh my
He's
goodness!
taking pictures of this, and that thing stands up and carries that body off. And right after that, things pick up. I mean, even his horse was killed and thrown on his front porch after that, and a lot of other things have happened. And he had pictures of these things that were going on there and what happened with all that. And so, yeah, at times, I don't know if they're bad, but I mean, to kill a dog and just throw it on your porch, I think that's bad
Man, that's terrible.
myself.
Golly.
So, yeah, some of them can be, but see, traditionally, these people, because we most natives will describe them as a people. We won't say that they're an animal because they're not an animal. They're like a people. They're their own people. They predate us. One other word translates to the nowhere people. We don't, they're nowhere. And another one is don't know where they come from. Translates to that too. So they've been here for a long, long time. But what they used to do for us, my tribe, is when you'd go out and you'd fast, they would protect you out there. They make sure no bears, mountain lions, wolverines, anything gonna get at you, enemies. They would keep you safe out there while you're fasting. Or for people that don't really know what that is, the other word they use in mainstream is vision quest. But it's fasting is what we call it. And so they would protect you while you were doing that. They kind of clear it out and make sure that you're all right and you get back okay. And your fast goes good, but they would be in the background. They're there. They're just watching over you. But that was one of the, traditionally the I guess role they played in the average Blackfeet life was that. Aside from the medicines and things like that.
Yeah, I mean that's I've heard stories of them being out. Um, there was I can't remember what I have the audio, but I can't remember exactly what tribe this was. But they were at the grounds, at the ceremonial grounds, and they had that drum going, and all of a sudden they look over and there's you know Bigfoot, you know, kind of on the edge of the clearing. They could see him. He was out, and it was sitting there swaying like it was swaying to the drum beat. Have you heard anything like that, or heard anyone tell a story about that?
Yeah, the swaying. My wife seen one when it was doing that, but it was up in a tree and it was like standing on one branch, reaching above its head, and it was swaying but making that whole tree move. And it ended up chasing her out of there. Long story short, it paced her. She was running on this dirt road and it was in the trees and it was a short one, like small, she said, but really powerful. That thing was powerful. When it jumped that 30 feet down, it barely made any noise.
Dang.
Said it should have been a big giant crash, but it wasn't. And she was out picking peppermint by this slough. And when it jumped, well, she said it got quiet. That's what got her attention. She said, "Oh, it got so quiet, even, you know, even the insects." She said, "I couldn't hear the river anymore." It got really quiet. So that's when I heard that swishing sound. I looked up and I seen it. And it was looking at me. Then it kind of tilted its head, cocked its head sideways, like, should I or should I not? She said it really scared her. I said, "Well, did its face look like ape-like or human?" He's like, "No, it's human, like
Hmm.
almost really human." And she said it was short though. It was really short but powerfully built. And says all of a sudden it just dropped from that tree. That's when I bolted. And it was just toying with me. She said it could have caught me. It could have harmed me, but it chased me all the way back up to that house.
Man.
Yeah,
Jeez.
there's so many of those things around. Like Uncut Savage was saying, like there's a spectrum of them. There, because of that balance that exists in the universe. There's always going to be some good and some bad and everything in between. Some of them want to raise hell. Some of them want to help. Some of them don't want nothing to do with nothing. But you go further north into Alaska, they're really mean. They're, like aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Really aggressive. You listen to those Alaskan stories about them. Those natives up there, they're mean. This one guy got a rock thrown right at his head. If he didn't lean down to tie his shoe, that would have taken his head off. He said he was really lucky that day, but they got the heck out of there.
Wasn't even a pebble. It was I bet it was like a boulder. Because
Yeah, big old rock.
man, yeah. Let me ask you. We're hitting the hour and a half mark. If anyone has any topics or any suggestions on a topic that you may want to hear or anything like that, let me know in the chat, and Rod can he may have a story or he may have something similar. Um, Also, too, if you're listening, put in the chat where you're from. Um, I kind of want to see. I'm just weird like that. I want to see who's creeping. I want to see where you're from. You just give me a general area, um, but Rod, man, I got something that maybe a lot of people don't really talk about, and I hadn't really seen a lot of stories about this. But I have a story, and I'll eventually tell that story. I gotta get more details because I was a young child when this happened. But have you heard of anything like lizards or like like the predator type monster or creature where they kind of like some people call it a glimmer man, where how the predator where how the predator is like invisible but you can see it moving. Have you heard anything like that?
No, I haven't. Nothing
Okay.
like, I mean, besides spirits, but nothing like I think what you're trying to describe. I've seen a blurry spirit that looked like that before, but nothing, like I'm seeing the predator in the trees and making stuff move and it kind of running around. I've never seen anything like that. Just a really blurry spirit down a hallway one time, peek around a corner at me. But that was it. That's the only kind of blurry looking one I've ever seen like that.
Mm. Yeah, because I got a few stories. I got a couple stories about that, but I was told a story. This is kind of interesting. They was headed back from I think a powwow out. They was in Kiowa country here in Oklahoma, and yeah, I can't remember the highway they were on, but basically they were on their way back, and they kind of looked and off in the trees. They saw something that looked like predator. You could see that its outline, like the outline of this whatever this was in the trees, and it was like had a kind of a glimmer to it. But I thought I'd ask you because you just never know what's out there. But are there any other maybe? Oh, actually, let me ask you this question because I ask people this who I interview or just people in private that I ask what what is your scariest story that you've heard that's made you really scared?
Yeah, so where I guess it would be this one if I was to really pinpoint one, it would be this one. So my dad's brother, he inherited my grandpa's house out in Temed. Not across the creek where I was explaining the ghost light and all that. This is on the other side of the creek, so this would be east of there. And my grandpa had a house out there. Well, when he passed, my uncle inherited it, and his two daughters one night were home, and they were out of town. They had to go out of town for something. Just his two daughters were home, and one of the daughters stayed home while the other one went up. Would be south of there, up the creek, and they were visiting friends. And she was going to get dropped off on the highway, and then walk the 200 yards down to the house because the car that her friends had was really low, and they didn't want it to bottom out and puncture the oil pan or something like that. And so they were just going to drop her off at the road and let her walk. And it's not out of the ordinary. They do that all the time. So that night, when the older one is waiting for her sister to get home, she falls asleep. She just goes into her room and just can't stay up any longer, goes to sleep. Well, at one point she wakes up because her sister is home, and she's got a chair pulled up kind of close to the bed and got like this tote bag over her shoulder, and she's staring at her. The younger sister's staring at the older sister, and the older sister wakes up and says, "What are you doing? Are you okay? What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" And she's kind of confused, like what's wrong? And she gets a little closer because for one, she needs glasses and it's dark in there. There's no lights on in the room, and she gets a little closer, and her sister's just smiling at her, but the smile goes all the way up to her ears.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, and like as she can see close, she even sees like these like glint off of these long dagger shaped teeth. Just this really wicked smile. And she kind of freaks out. She jumps back and crawls backwards on the bed, like, "Are you all right?" She still doesn't know if she's seeing what she thinks she's seeing. Like, "Are you okay?" And just then she stands up, um, turns her body and walks out of the room, but her face never leaves the older sister.
Oh man.
And she walks out, and she said, "I could hear her digging in that linen closet right outside my door. And then down the hallway she walked, I could hear her in the living room and in the kitchen." She said, "I'm so scared. I don't know what to do." She says, "Finally, I'm just laying there and I end up falling back to sleep. And I wake up the next morning and I go out, slowly go out, and I see her sleeping on the couch, and I wake her up. You were acting really weird last night. You were in my room staring at me, and it's like, wait, what? No, I got dropped off at the road, and when I got home, I just went right to sleep on the couch. And she said, but you know what I seen last night? By the dumpster we have by the road. She said there was a coyote, and it was peeking at me from the side of the trash can, and I didn't think nothing, so I walked around the other way, trying to go around it. It's like just a coyote. At least it ain't like a wild dog. It ain't gonna bother me. So, but she's still kind of wary of it, so she walks around, like makes a circle around that, wide circle around it, and she looks back at it, and it's looking at her from the other side now. But this time it has the same smile that her sister was describing.
Man, I just got goosebumps.
And it was from a coyote too, but the coyotes don't smile like humans. Come on now, but its smile went all the way up to its ears too. And she said she didn't want to she had like 200 yards to walk in the dark over these hills down to the house. So she didn't want to get too spooked and just straight up run and panic, She just kept her pace and marched straight to that house and got in there. But that's when they compared notes the next day. What happened that night was whatever that smiling spirit was that had that wicked smile on it.
Man.
Yeah, that's nightmare fuel, man.
Man, I got goosebumps on that one. Dang, you had me, man. I was like, I knew you was gonna have something like that, man. Golly. I mean, man, I don't even know what to say to that. I'm almost speechless. I am speechless. I'm over here just talking. I'm word salad right now. But man, see, because one thing about that type of entity or being or whatever you want to call it, and it's like, what do they call it? Doppelganger. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I've done an episode over doppelgangers, but they don't look right. They almost there's something off about them. You don't really know what it is. And I've had people tell me I have a doppelganger running around, and I'm like, man, I don't even know. I don't even know you. Like people say, oh, I know you from somewhere. I was like, I really don't know who you are. I was like, man, hopefully they wasn't out here committing murder or something, or doing something crazy. But
Wow.
man, but Rod, man, you got any other? Before we end this thing, you got any other stories that you're thinking on the top of your head? You're like, man, I gotta tell this one real quick. You got any other stories to send us off?
Yeah, I got one that's really strange. I'll leave you guys with this one, and you can make of it what you will. But there was this sweat lodge one time that my uncle was holding, and my aunt was there. This would be my great uncle, and my dad's sister was at this sweat lodge, and at one point, when they broke, excuse me, in between rounds, they look up and there's a craft up there. There's a craft. No noise, no nothing. They could see these little portholes with these little beings looking down at them, like watching them, seeing what they're doing. Everybody kind of gets scared and they go back into that lodge, and the old man crawls out, looks up and sees it, this UFO with these little beings watching them. Crawls back in and says, oh, don't worry about them. Don't be scared of them. They're just curious. They're like us. They're just trying to see what we're doing down here. So there's something with these travelers that are interested in spirituality. And I don't know what that is. They must sense something going on that's bigger than us. I don't know, but they're really curious about it. So I'll leave you guys with that.
Yeah, that UFO phenomenon, man, is just something, something different. I haven't really talked about this much, but I don't know if you've heard anything like this, and I'd be curious if you have. Back, I'd say probably pre-removal days, each tribal town was gifted from, what they call them, star people.
Mm-hmm.
They were gifted these metal tectonic type plates, and each tribal town had one. and it was a gift from them, basically saying, "Hey, you're doing what's right. You know, you're trying to basically, live in harmony with the earth." And those plates were passed down, and some of them made it over here to Oklahoma. And I
Wow.
believe the last known, I don't really know the date, but they said that a couple generations ago still had a tribal town still had that plate, and that was one of my grandpa's life, kind of his life mission, almost kind of to figure out who had that, who still had those plates. Have you heard anything like that? Gifting, maybe something that could be kind of
No,
something like that.
no, I haven't. That's a really interesting story. To tell you the truth, we ought to live where we're looked at again like that. We need more than plates.
That's what I'm saying. But and I remember it was said that it was like we were living in harmony with the earth, and we were
Yeah,
doing, and the people were doing what they're supposed to do, and that was how a lot of that medicine was given. And I'm kind of curious, if I would. That's one thing too, man. When it's my time to go, and I get up to the creator, and I'm gonna be like, "All right, man, spill the beans. What's going on with this?
yeah.
Let me know what's happening with this, because I'm so fascinated with that, and I hope my grandpa passed in 2021, and so I'm hoping he went up to the creator and got his answer, because that was something he was always wondering about. I remember him talking about that as a little guy, and then even a couple years before, but man, I knew this was gonna be a banger. I knew it was, and you came and you brought the heat. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, Lodge Tales is everywhere. It's on YouTube. There are paid, member-only episodes on, Patreon, and I reserve some of the juiciest stuff for the Patreon, so if you want more of the podcast, you can find them at Patreon, but they're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Podbean. I mean, pretty much anywhere you get podcasts. Red Circle is another one. Yeah, they're out there, so yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And, it's fun talking like this. Maybe we'll do it again. And you got to come on my podcast and tell us some stories too.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's one thing I love. I'm glad you, because so a little bit of backstory on how we kind of linked up is, I can't remember who followed who, but like, I saw your podcast in my recommended, and I said, "Huh, that'll be interesting," because I think I follow the guy. I can't remember Shaklan. I don't know how it's pronounced. He does the SWs. He talks about those all the time.
Yeah. Sean Clenn. Yeah.
Sean Clan, there we go.
Hmm.
And I've watched a few of his videos, and I think that episode popped up. And it's crazy how, I don't know if it's like the creator, I don't know if it's like energies or whatever, but you popped up on my profile view on TikTok, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, this is a little strange to me. And we got the conversation going, but like, that's one thing that I love having different native podcasters, and I mean just podcasters in general who, I'm not saying I have a big platform, but there's some people that listen to my show, and it's always good to me to kind of mix, and because you bring something different than I bring. I'm kind of more, I guess you say, urban.
Hmm.
City. I guess city Indian is what you want to call us. Call me, I guess, um, but you have a different kind of a look. But it's crazy just talking to you. Both of us, I'm like, man, dang, we both kind of have the same experience on these things.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you came on. I'm glad that we could get it to work, even though it's like 12 or it's like midnight. It's a little past midnight here, but hey, man, I had to get you on, because I think that your podcast um, is, to me, in my opinion, pretty top level, and I'm glad that you came on.
Oh, nice. Thanks, man. Yeah, I like yours too. I know my audience would love your stories as well. It's always an honor to help another native podcaster grow. We support each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really
1000%.
it's good to do that, man. I couldn't be more thankful for the opportunity to come on yours, and
You let me know, man. Let me know a date and time or whenever you can do it. If you can do it on the weekends or if it's Friday night works for you, just let me know, and I'd love to come on your podcast and share a bunch. I'm not saying I got a bunch of stories, but I got a bunch of stories about things that maybe are more here in Oklahoma kind of type of stories and yeah. But let me know, man. I'd love to come on.
all right, we'll do, man.
Well, guys, this is the end of this episode. I appreciate everyone who joined us live. And for those of you guys who will be listening to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere where you listen to it, let me know what you think about the episode and go like, subscribe to Lodge Tales Podcast anywhere, everywhere we can go, or everywhere where you listen to a podcast. A little bit of announcement here. I actually will be on another podcast. I did an interview this past week with Cryptids of the Corn. I told a bunch of stories on there, kind of gave a little bit backstory, with Justin or Mr. E. So be on the lookout for that. And you know what? And be on the lookout for a part 2 of Lodge Tales. You just never know. But I appreciate everyone that continues to support the podcast. Links to all of Rod's stuff, Patreon, YouTube, all that good stuff is in the description. And also the merch store is also in the description too as well. Like I said, I appreciate you guys supporting the podcast, and I'm going to catch you on the next one.